Ivan Cardoso Moreno, sou coordenador da Câmara Temática de Recursos Hídricos da ABS e também diretor executivo da associação. E é com muita satisfação que iniciamos a série de sessões especiais rumo à Brasil Water Week, o mais importante evento internacional sobre água realizado no país. A Brasil Water Week vai acontecer agora próximo, nos dias 23 a 27 de maio, na plataforma que é exclusiva e interativa. O site para as inscrições está no ar e você pode entrar e ter todas as informações. Convidamos a todos vocês que estejam conosco neste grande evento. E aqui no canal da ABS, do nosso ABS Saneamento no YouTube, você participa gratuitamente destas sessões especiais que iniciam-se hoje e vai até o dia 20. Então, teremos sessões especiais dia 11 hoje, dia 12, dia 17, 18, 19 e 20 de maio. Todas gratuitas e você poderá acompanhá-las pelo nosso canal do YouTube. Além de um webinar especial que nós teremos também, agora no dia 13, sobre vigilância epidemiológica a partir de esgotos. Acesse o nosso link, que está também no nosso chat, e faça sua inscrição para todos estes eventos, participando gratuitamente conosco. A ABS tem uma missão de levar o conhecimento a todos, a toda a população e aos interessados na engenharia sanitária e ambiental. E, portanto, cumprindo este grande e importante papel, estamos aqui com esmero e muita dedicação para levar o que é de melhor do conhecimento da área a todos vocês. Essa sessão especial tem como tema
special session has in this topic we'll be talking about the water legal framework, and we will be talking about very important topics and experiences, and we will also be talking about
e, portanto, para que nós tenhamos esse debate,
and for us to have this debate, so that we can talk more about these different perspectives, we'll have the participation of Monica Porto, who is the Director of Regional Systems of Sabesp. We'll also have Jefferson Nascimento de Oliveira, who is a professor at UNESP and who is also a representative of technical organizations inside the National Council for Water Resources. And we will also have the presentation of Professor Rodrigo Farias, who is a study analyst at Executive Secretariat of the Sectoral Agenda of the 2030 Agenda in the Sanitary Service Superintendents in Chile. He'll be sharing some international experience with us. We will get to know more about all of them during our sessions, and if you want to learn more about their experience, you can go to our website to read their resumes. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today and for accepting our invitation to take part in our discussions this morning. I'd also like to say that I'm very honored to be here with all of you. I have some dear friends together with me today, and I'm sure that we will have very enlightening discussions about this new proposal for water treatment and water and resources in Brazil. For those who are watching us, you can participate by posting questions in the chat box. Our guests will be answering your questions at the end. Regarding all different issues related to this topic, I would like to first talk about the importance of this webinar. This webinar is intended to talk about different perspectives throughout our trajectory. And for those who already know about the water legal framework, understand that many points on our proposal and on this bill need to be further clarified and discussed. And that's why today we will have different guests talking about the different points on this legal framework and also to help us make sense of what is part of this legal framework. These guests will not be talking about Abby's opinions per se, but they will be sharing their knowledge and their opinions and the opinion of the institutions that they are representing today. We will also have the experience from our international colleague who will be talking about the Chilean experience. But to kick us off in our discussions, I would like to turn over to Professor Monica Porto. As I mentioned, she's the Director of Regional Systems in Sabesp. Professor Monica, the floor is yours, and welcome once again. Good morning, Josivan. I would like to greet Abis and to thank Abis for this excellent opportunity for us to hold such a relevant discussion to the water sector in general. We know that the water resource sector is a very important sector, and it's very relevant for us to be here discussing the new water resource legal framework. I'd like to greet Jefferson. It's been a long time since we were last together, and I would also like to greet Rodrigo. It's a pleasure to meet him and to have him here. It's awesome to have also the perspective of Chile that has a different legislation from us, a different experience. So it's very enriching to us to learn from other experiences. I've been working with water resources for quite a long time now, and I remember that back then, in the 1988, we introduced the new water resources system. We also started different laws and different acts in 1991 in São Paulo. We had a state law being implemented in São Paulo in 1991, which was a pioneering law on water resources. And when the 9433 law was enacted and enforced, I was honored to participate throughout the process of fully implementing the law. I was at the time president of ABRH, which was the Water Resource Agency at the time. So I have definitely been around from the beginning. We can say that since the beginning of these discussions, I've been around. Currently, I am the Director of Regional Systems at Sabesp, and I am in charge of municipalities in the countryside of São Paulo and on the coastal area. We are responsible for 300 municipalities in my department, so now I am directly dealing with users and not only users, but I am also responsible for monitoring, and I deal with the operations that take place in these 34 municipalities. So we are responsible for delivering water directly to people's households 24/7, 365 days a year. So today, this experience of working directly with users is a very enriching experience. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about the new water resource framework. I have been following this discussion from afar because my current duties at Sabesp do not allow me a lot of free time to deal with many other things, but I have been following these discussions from afar, and I have already taken part in a seminar at the National Council for Water Resources, where at the time I had the opportunity to learn a lot about what is being discussed in this framework, and I also had the chance to share my opinion. And as Josephan mentioned, this is just my personal opinion based on my many years of experience, my many decades I would say, of experience in the water resource sector. So I'm here to talk about how I see the evolution of the water resource system and also to talk about my experience working with end users. Well, when we worked on the 7663 law, which is the state law of the state of São Paulo enacted in 1991, and as I have also worked together with a team that put together the law 9433, and both of them, there was a great emphasis on multiple uses. So when you talk about water multiple uses, this is a guideline that has helped the creation of both laws. So the possibility of guaranteeing and ensuring that all users would be able to use water. We know that water is a common asset. It's a public asset in Brazil. So our main goal was to have every user using water, having access to water. So both of these laws have created management instruments so that these multiple users and these multiple uses could actually take place, where users would have really their rights guaranteed to access water. On the other hand, I understand that if we take our state law, which has now celebrated its 30th anniversary, and the 9433 law has been around for almost 30 years as well, we know that these were pioneering laws. They have created new concepts at the time, and I think that as technicians in these sectors, we have the duty of monitoring the evolution of these laws and also making changes whenever necessary. None of these laws are set in stone, so I think that we have to have common sense here, and we need to look at what can be worked on and what we can improve throughout time. So now I'm going to talk a little about what I believe are important themes that are brought by the water resource legal framework. This is I just want to make a caveat here. This is our important themes that we find in this legal framework, but the way that we are going to roll it out is going to depend on our discussions and on our end goals. But there are some points that are very relevant. This legal framework has been presented as kind of something that it counterbalances the 9433 law, and I don't see it that way. I think that some points that are part of this framework are actually ways of enhancing the national policy for water resources, and these points will help us make a more mature system. One point that I believe to be extremely relevant is when it comes to sharing costs. When I'm talking about, what do I mean by that? Well, when I'm talking about sharing costs, I'm talking about a project that has multiple uses and multiple users. So in this case, this project needs to have its costs shared across users. In some cases, the cost to be shared can be implementation and operation costs, and in some other cases, the cost to be shared will be the operating costs. So the concept of sharing costs is quite broad and is part of our water resource sector, and this is something where we already have a consensus. We do understand that there is a need for us to really enforce this instrument. this sharing costs instrument so that we can have a more efficient system. The idea of sharing costs is that users,
Those who benefit from that infrastructure, the idea is to have them participating on the building, sometimes operation and maintenance, or a combination of that. Okay. In the 7663 state law from 1991, this cost sharing is also a management tool, meaning it was designed as so important in the São Paulo legislature that it was upgraded to the position of management tool. The 7663 law, it doesn't actually, it's not stated as a tool, a management tool, but it is part in the chapter of the actual law where there should be some sort of discipline for cost sharing. And these items, these articles from the law 9443 were vetoed because there was no consensus as how costs should be shared. There was a discussion back then, together with the electric sector, about royalty payments, and there was a previous law to that. There was no consensus as to how cost would be shared, so cost sharing was actually vetoed. Then, now, with the water legal framework brings cost sharing back to the table, especially when it comes to operation and maintenance matters. So you see there are several frameworks and that is actually implemented and designed by the power public, meaning state or federal level governments, and the several measures that are implemented by the government in different realms. And then operation and maintenance are still under the public run. So the water legal framework is to bring more protagonism from the user side so that they actually take part. They are actually part of the cost sharing. So users are part of cost sharing for maintenance and operations because this is a type of infrastructure that is either bringing water to the population, meaning it is bringing direct benefits for the sanitation sector and industry, and bringing water for irrigation purposes to also benefiting farming, as well as other uses, sailing, and other diverse uses that can actually come from different water structures. So you see, I believe that bringing to the table this discussion about water cost sharing, it is part of the water resources system management. And I believe this is incredibly relevant when it comes to the new water legal framework, bring together to the table a discussion that was previously vetoed, the 9443. It was fully interrupted in 9443, but now it's back to the table and being discussed. And I consider that when it comes to cost sharing, that the new legal framework brings to the table is actually a continuation. It is a segue for the water implementation policy that was made possible in 1997. So that point I find very important when we speak of water legal framework. The second point that I find incredibly relevant to cover when it comes to water legal framework is the possibility to negotiate the different users who have been granted license to operate. I think that is very important because water is still a public good, a public resource. Users are still having the need and actually the obligation to request this grant, this permission for their needs. And I believe that all agencies who are licensed to operate will keep looking at their license. What I mean is, agencies and companies who have a license to run have to keep analyzing their license, their grant to operate, just the same as usual, meaning looking at what is the actual use that users will make, how much is being requested? Is that reasonable? Other question, is there water availability for that? So for me, in the entire process, the granting, the licensing instrument is still having the same discipline use kind of an allocation that 933 takes, established by 933 or with the old legal. So the grant as for the issuance as that can be used and is a disciplinary tool, meaning it gives access to water that is a common public resource. So what does the water legal framework brings to the table? The possibility to negotiate among users. Okay? This is a user-user relationship, meaning user A has the one grant, the user B has a grant, and among them they discuss and they make an agreement. They reach an agreement. What do I see as a major advantage in this possibility? And here I speak wearing my hat on the other side of the story as a national regional director at Sabesp. Under my executive directorship, we have executives, 330 executives in municipalities, 334 municipalities. So the west side of the state, that where water bodies are very productive. So the 334 municipalities are fed by underground wells. But the municipalities, as we move to the east of the state of São Paulo, water bodies become less productive and the water capturing depend on surface water. So in the regional board of regional services, we have 250 or approximately 250 of surface water capturing. Because I'm speaking of small municipalities and small water collection, most of this water capture is done by water streams. So of all the water capturing, we only have 6 that is done out of a reservoir. All of them are done at water streams. And this water stream capture, it is seasonable to those thread of waters, of a trickle of water is very much seasonal, and there is a direct relation of all capture as to the use, especially when it comes to irrigation purposes. In the past few years, the state of São Paulo has been facing very severe droughts. In the metropolitan region, São Paulo 2014-15 was very memorable, and 2020 was also a terrible year when it comes to drought. 2021 was very dry indeed. For us, for the metropolitan region in São Paulo, if Sabesp had not made investments in redundant systems, new capturing systems, new systems like São Lourenço systems, new water transposition, like we had an interconnection between Paraíba do Sul with Catarina connection, we would have gone through a major water crisis, and we didn't face a water crisis in the metropolitan region in São Paulo in 2021 due to the past investment made that after the investment in 2014-15. But the municipalities that actually depend on superficial capturing suffered a lot. And meaning we have a new issuance, we have a grant to actually capture for public water feeding, but others at a basin too. So what happens when what movement needs to do at every droughts or very severe drought, they actually go to DAE. They're the ones that makes the issuance of all permits, and DAE, that's the actual local agency. And DAE is an agency that intermediates, so to speak, negotiations, especially when it comes to irrigation agents. So several of our basins and our water collections are capturing. DAE actually helps us to do what? To to have an agreement with irrigation agents, meaning evening irrigation, increase a water collection during the day, capturing during the day, this kind of arrangement, so that then in order that we have farmers are not harmed, as well as Sabesp is also not harmed. So DAE has been having a very important role in that sense in finding compromises and helping with negotiations. Now, mind you, here we have a whole pathway to go through, to take. What I mean is there are no clear, well-defined designed tools, instruments for that to happen. 9443 legislation, what does it state? Public water services is a priority. That's what it actually states. However, I ask you, is that fair that it's done at what cost? That people who need to irrigate their fields have their water collection interrupted so that the municipality is serviced. So the city is a priority. I am actually in compliance with my permit fine. If there is not enough water in the basin, farmers can stop because I need the water. Listen, this is not a clear, well-defined instrument. There is nothing very well stated. Now put yourself in the farmers or irrigation agent shoes. Are they going to lose income because the public's water service is a priority? Definitely it is. But the water management needs to find the means, the tools, so that users can have as little damage during drought as much as possible. So this possibility of negotiation, of compromise. I'll give you an example. The water services utility company, can they have an agreement set with farmers or irrigation agents, as we call in Portuguese, so that we can have some sort of reimbursement or trade-off? I think this is very interesting because I think we're investing a lot of money in redundancy, in new water collections to be actually used, to be tapped into in case of emergencies. And this is this is an emergency resource, and that is actually moved on to tariffs, meaning users pay for these works to improve water security levels. Now, I wonder, wouldn't it be simpler if we had a trade-off kind of agreement with users? This is just thinking out loud. Some type of restitution as a trade-off kind of agreement, so we can better level these tools that enable this discussion. When speak of scarcity discussion, really, because this scarcity discussion is not really covered by the 9443 piece of legislation. Again, I would like to repeat, I would think this is an upgrade. It is a perfectioning, an improvement of the existing law. I would like to close my reflection here to you, saying the following. All the issues that the water legal framework brings to the table, it's all about having users to be more protagonists, meaning users and the system are the actual protagonists. When it comes to cost sharing for permit and license to use, that is better negotiated. It's not at will, I would say. I would say it's more about having better agreement among users. So this better protagonism from the user side is very important. But again, the distance between practice and theory is quite big. And I know that, I am aware, I have been following, in spite of the 976 piece of legislation 1991 have the cost sharing as a management tool. It was stated but never happened. So there was no discipline to put that into practice. So in spite of the fact that I know that the distance between practice and theory is very big, what I bring to you is my theory as a researcher. I'm wearing this hat from several decades now, and also bringing my expertise and experience as a manager, meaning, and as a user too. So, Josivan, thank you so much. These were my points I've covered. I'm looking so forward to hearing from my other colleagues.
Professora Mônica,
Professor Monica, we would like to thank you for your presentation, for your reflections. Certainly, I can actually foresee the debate is going to be wonderful because your points about the user protagonism, all your points covered about our reflections concerning permits and water industry, because ultimately, on your words, things that not have happened. But when we were actually designing the water legal framework, we were thinking about this strong impact about trends, not saying that it is a trend, but it was interpreted as a trend, and also bringing this whole view as to see there is no monopoly for water service for farming and human consumption. There is prioritizing when it comes to very extreme scarcity. So in times of crisis, I'm already giving you this line that you mentioned and the question, is this right? This new water legal framework, does it have to come to the table to resolve the gaps, like you said, to bridge the gaps, as you mentioned? Because we have water allocation very well discussed, so that all water resources and users can work to help use the water for as long as it exists and for how long I want it there, so that all users minimally can be considered and well designed, so that we have as little impact as possible, so that we have extreme drought, so it's very well trade-off. So I think these points are very rich for later debates, so that I have more reflection. Now, to continue this conversation as to clearing to what the purposes is, let's hear from Professor Jefferson from UNESCO, also representing the National Water Resources by Technical and Scientific Board. And Professor Jefferson, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Floor is yours. Thank you. Hello, Josivan. Good morning, everybody. Professor Monica, very good to see you. Even though, in spite it is virtual, it's always a pleasure to hear you and learn from you. Your knowledge is very impressive and very broad. And Professor Rodrigo, whom I will keep calling Professor, he's our colleague from Chile. I would like to thank Abis for the opportunity for being here with us again, putting us together for this discussion, because I find this discussion incredibly important, so that this debate happens and society actually sees what our purpose is, our proposition is, because PL means a legislation that is being designed, meaning a bill. So we're still designing, and I'm going to bring to you our experience as to the technical services for research and development. So we're part of UNESCO at our campus. Joseph, my pronunciation my pronunciation has a major accent from the northeast of our country, so don't mind my accent. Now, as for the water resources, like Monica said, I have a lot of experience, etc. Let me tell you, when I was studying my master's degree in São Carlos in 1988, I was part of the CPJ. And remember, it was all very complicated, several municipalities taking part. And in São Paulo, in Brazil, I think in Brazil is the second oldest. First it was Sinos, right? In Rio Grande do Sul. That's the oldest one. So the water question, what we have seen in the country in these past few years, we need to have policies. Water resources policy, a state policy, and not an administration policy, a state policy. So it was not a state policy in the past. In spite of all the implications and all the difficulties that we have faced in the past decades, really, with the 9443, this was a policy, a state policy, for Brazilian water resources. So, and in this policy, we see, just like Professor Monica mentioned, what is stated that we have to have water service and animal service. And what we see in the state of São Paulo, and we see in the whole country as a whole, the conflict for water. It's always being created, and the country needs to think on that we don't live in the water laurels. We always say, oh, we have 12% of all the fresh water in the world. Where is all this fresh water? I'd like to ask everybody who is watching us. Approximately, we have 100 people with us now online. Where is fresh water actually stored? In regions where there is no population that actually needs those water. And if you observe regions like in Amazon region, Manaus region, and the number of wells, the Manaus is serviced by wells, that by catchment basins that do not actually collect this water. I need to make this clear. Raw water in Brazil is at a very low cost. We don't have high tariffs. And what is necessary to highlight in this new legal framework, that we need progress, headway, meaning communication, information well spread. Now, just recently, I think it's about to finish this public hearing about this PL. PL is a bill that is being designed to become legislation. So there's regional discussion now to cover the main points with the main experts, and so that the legal framework legislation comes to be enforcement. It's all there available on the website. The possibility of having the community contributing. And how the main motto, like you said, Joseph, the motto is to have a water market. A water market would be something for us, in particular, research and teaching in academia, society, industry, they all see that in a very suspicious or in a fearful, caution manner. Because, like I said, the conflicts in our country are quite high. In 2020, for example, if I'm not mistaken, we registered 230 conflicts pertaining water, pertaining water use and demand of water. We see some catchment basins in our country, and there we have very serious conflict where we have a lot of demand for water for farming purposes that also is destined for water for the power grid. Now, 2021, end of year, beginning of 2022, we had a power crisis due to the water crisis as a consequence of water crisis. So society as a whole should see that all climate changes and the changes that are being imposed to us is being very much beyond what we expected. What Monica said in 2014, that the 2014 crisis taught us a lot in the Southeast as to what happens and has always happened in the Northeast. And this was disseminated. Recently, last year, Rio Grande do Sul had a major water crisis in all its region, rural region, meaning farming. The countryside of the Rio Grande do Sul state suffered due to lack of water. Thus, we need to create new mechanisms to face this and address this properly. But all these mechanisms can't, even further, be associated with the population suffering. Why do I say that? It is necessary that we see the premise as managers that this water must be used mainly carefully. I'd like to see more pressure coming to users and utility companies that have waste, that I would like to see strongly so rational use of water, a blue seal on our water resources and equipment. This is not being proposed. This would be so important. You can't buy the one car, the one piece of a device with no blue seal. In the case of water, we don't see that. We keep using water.
Aonde o
In regions,
quantidade per capita disponível
the per capita water availability is actually quite low.
regiões pobres,
We're talking of poor regions when it comes to water availability. The metropolitan regions,
houvesse amanhã, que o amanhã fosse
as if there was no tomorrow,
controle total.
as if we had full control, and we don't have full control.
Situação aonde eu gostaria também,
This situation,
realmente, né, o meu
personally,
gostaria de
I'm speaking for myself,
né,
better
os
controls
grandes usuários,
of major
a
users
gente sabe que deve existir, existe
than we know should use. Actually, there is technology for that.
para que não cheguemos, né, e nem
So-
achemos sempre, como nós achamos, que nós usamos a água superficial,
That we see and we do as usual.
que é você ter
It's just
qualidade
use
dessa
surface
água
water and also the quality of this water surface. Brazil has to invent, even though it is not the motto of the point of our discussion, it has to invest massively on sanitation. That's so, yes. It is crazy that we're having a city like Sao Paulo. When we were prospecting with the Pinheiros River, with clandestine connections, illegal connections, thousands of illegal clandestine connections in domestic sewage being connected straight to Pinheiros River in the city of São Paulo. We need to look this further. And this needs to be addressed immediately, and better controls too for waste of the underground water. We can't enable underground water that is pure water that usually we have better quality, but when it's contaminated, it takes a lot of time to be fully recovered, and the volumes and the water flow rate is very low too.
Não é simplesmente o marco hídrico que vai fazer.
And not the legal framework is not going to do this. This is an awareness change, mindset change.
PL 4546 seja importante,
Now, the new legislation would be fundamental to actually help the mindset of public, private, and stakeholders as well as users to change our style, change our view about our main
com relação ainda ao marco hídrico, né?
our main most important resource. As to the water legal framework, the idea is to expand and help conflict. We need to do a bit of safekeeping so that we can avoid situations like we've seen before, like the US, for example. We got the Supreme Court decisions. Here we also got that to our Supreme Court. Decisions about water.
Não tem muito nexo você ter todo
It makes no sense to have a legal framework already well designed and implemented. It makes no sense to have
corpo técnico
technical experts very well prepared
nesse tipo
in all agencies, but then you get this kind of discussion
tribunal.
being resolved by Supreme Court. This has taken place in the 2014-2015 crisis. We had reasonable adjustments in that sense. However, that this does not happen in the US.
Se ele está na nascente, ele realmente detecta.
If the water is at the spring,
Não conseguir
If the water does not reach the mouth of the river, if people who are downstream and if they cannot collect this water, it's fine.
da água na
The law will
primeira
privilege the water holder.
tem que ver que no
And this is something that we need to see and analyze, because in Brazil, there's a high risk for that happening, because our population has to deal with economic problems as well. Many times people can have access to water because they cannot afford it, especially in the northeastern region of Brazil. Another important point that needs to be discussed is regarding the reuse of water. Reusing is something that needs to be standardized. I know that this is something that is being already discussed in São Paulo. During our last meeting, we have discussed this issue within our technical chamber of the National Council for Water Resources. We have been discussing this matter. We also have a department of teaching science and technology where we are discussing this matter. There are two resolutions that address this. It's important that we can advance in this area so that we can create a legal framework where states are capable of legislating. Some reuse laws have been reenacted in the state of Rio de Janeiro. The same thing is happening in São Paulo, where we are reviewing our law, but we must have legislation on reuse. But towards that end, we need to be able to collect sewage and treat sewage so that we can be successful. But this is something that is still quite a negligible service in the country, not only in my state, but throughout the country. There are cities in the south of Brazil that do not provide sewage collection and sewage treatment services. So we need to look at this problem as a whole. Bill 4546, I believe, is playing a very relevant role in having us go back to this discussion. Everybody was too calm, I would say. Everybody was relying on Law 9433 and on basing committees as well. We have very few basing committees that are working successfully for the amount of rivers and watersheds that we have. We have just 230, 200 and something water basing committees, and this is not enough. Another important point is the use and land use and occupation as well. We are still seeing problems in this area in São Paulo. We also have a basing committee here in São Paulo, and we have noticed that we are having major problems. And we're seeing that we do not have a water cycle that is being well used and well managed. So we have to get together as a society, and we need to also rely on scientific data, of course. The three speakers here today have worked in universities, and we know that we need to bring all the knowledge that we have been creating within universities to the population. There are a lot of experts in this area. There are a lot of also studies that try to look at the country as a whole. There are 14 there are projects that involve 14 universities that have PhD courses that are offered to students free of charge. The strictest census program, meaning that after their master's programs that people can move on to become PhDs. But anyway, what I mean is that we need to use this knowledge and to apply it throughout the country. However, we have to have individual solutions, but they can be replicated in other states of our country as long as there are good solutions. Today we are here discussing the Bill 4546. And we also have our new national plan for water resources, the 2240 Act, which has been broadly discussed by the Ministry of Regional Development and our society. And this brings light to this problem because this way, regardless of the administration we will have a national policy that will help us deal with water resource management. I don't know if I still have time to keep talking, but that's all I wanted to share with you for today. Thank you, Josephine, once again for the invitation, and I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, Professor Monica and Professor Rodrigo, for sharing the floor with me, and I hope we have a fruitful discussion. Professor Jefferson, first of all, I want to say that everything you have presented is important for our discussion. You have added new elements to our discussion, and these elements are connected to all the other points that we have been discussing. We have to learn more about Bill 4546, 2021, which has been discussed. We know that joint management and environmental management and also issues that are related to the work of basin committees, also other points that are in our new legal framework and how they are connected to other laws. This is all part of the discussions that we need to have. This shows that there is a major need for us to better clarify this bill. So I understand that everything that you have presented to us have helped us understand many of the different aspects that were presented by Professor Monica. And we see now that this legal framework is introducing this idea of joint management. And of course, we cannot just forget everything that has been done so far and everything that we have achieved due to all the other joint management instruments that have been implemented by other entities and by their work jointly with the National Water Agency and other agencies. But of course that we need to think about other issues such as the payment for water services. How can we go about this? Professor Monica already touched upon this. We know that in practice we need to find out how this is going to work. And I believe that we need to advance here. And I know that every time we discuss a bill, we are looking for mechanisms and new formats that can be complementary to what is still challenging to us and to problems that we haven't been able to tackle. I'm sure that all proposals need to be taken into consideration, but we really need to learn from other experiences as well. Are there places where this bill that we are discussing in Brazil that have already implemented similar things successfully? Are there places that already implement similar things and that have noticed that we might not get the results that we want, which is trying to solve and bridge the gaps that we have due to short of investments, for example? I'm talking about investments here because we know that one of the important points that we have on the bill is trying to attract investments and to make also water infrastructure more sustainable in their operation and maintenance. This is very clear in our bill. At the same time, we know that the way we manage things will change, and we have to deal with the way that we manage water. We need to take into consideration where the way our management system is set up. How will this change as the new bill is implemented? So this is something that we need to reflect on, and we as panelists will have to discuss, and as a moderator, I need to of course, talk about these questions. Before passing the floor to Rodrigo, I just want to remind you that Brazil Water Week will start on the 23rd, from the 23rd to the 27th of May, and you just need to register on our website to participate. And I want to highlight how important it is to have your participation. This is just a teaser event that we are having this week. I just want to say that the Brazil Water Week will be amazing, and I'm sure you have noticed this from our first discussions. Professor Rodrigo, now the floor is yours. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and how it can help us in our discussions? Professor Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Josima, for the invitation. Can you tell me if you see the presentation? Can you see the presentation?
Sim, sim.
Okay.
Estamos vendo sim.
Thanks a lot. Well, Josima told me about the changes in the regulations. So in Brazil, so in Chile, we have a lot of experiences about the inclusion of the private sector and the concessionaries, because we started in 1982, even rather than British Telecom was liberalized in UK. So we have a lot of experiences, and I will try to show you the things that I think that will be more useful for this conversation. So first, what is the Superintendence of Sanitary Services? Well, Sanitary Services in Chile is the name. Sanitary Services is the name in Chile for the water and sewerage and sanitation sector. What are our functions of the superintendents? We are the regulator of water and sanitation sector in urban areas where there are concessionaries. We have functions. First, regulatory function, what is elaboration of tariff studies, investment plans, and operational territory extensions. Second, we have the supervisory function, what is drinking water and wastewater continuity, quality, pressures, customer sanctions, among others. From few years ago, with a new law, we are in charge to control and to state the tariffs for the rural sanitary services, because till that moment, we just care about the urban areas. And another function is the support, what is composed by information and technology, studies and standards for the sector. Water and sanitation sector in Chile, how is in figures? 49 operation companies in urban areas, 387 drinking water services in urban areas, and 2,285 drinking water and sanitation in rural areas. That's why we have more staff, because this is a big and very huge challenge for us. 5.8 millions of users in urban areas. We have almost 100% in drinking water coverage in urban areas, and it's similar to sewerage and wastewater treatment. We have more than 18,000 citizens or inquiries per year. We have 301 wastewater treatment plants in urban areas. And also, we control 2,890 establishments that generate liquid industrial waste in urban areas. And we make every year 3,600 supervisions. About infrastructure, we have the faculties and water and sanitation sector in Chile are in urban areas, but it is in an area that is a little smaller than the urban area. It is not the complete urban area. It is the operational territory where the people live. And in the sector, we have 55% the water it's from groundwater, 44% from surface water, and 1% from seawater with desalination. And 40,000 kilometers is the drinking water network. It's 6,500 enclosures and 33% of non-revenue water. And a part of that is the water losses. But we are working to measure the losses, because till now we have this number, that is the non-revenue water. The superintendence, in another figures, we have, these are numbers from the staff. For example, in the central level in Santiago, we have the 65%, and the rest in regions, in other cities throughout the whole country, in urban areas. 43% are women and 57% are men. In overall, 2,017 workers in December of 2021. But as I told you before, because of the rural services that we are in charge now and those new functions, we increased our staff. And now we are in December of 2022, 234 workers. And supervision, consensus, and legal staff are 70%, and others are 30%. What are our immediate focus? First, because of the change in the law that I told you before, the rural water and sanitation services. This is a huge challenge for SIS to integrate the rural water and sanitation services to its functions, because this implies to know services with other conditions which are different to the urban areas. Modify supervisory procedures till the need to adapt the usual language even. We have in charge also the explorations. They have had their origins in incapacity to self-finance of very small companies. This is common when, for example, in where there are a few population, for example, less than 500 people, and a company from the construction sector to sell households, they create a sanitary water and sanitation company. So through the years, they don't have the capacity to self-finance. That's why we have made these explorations. With this, what happened with 3 companies, ESESA, ESETO, and Aguasquere. Another issue is the law project. SIS and the Ministry of Public Works have worked together in elaborating a law project and changes the regulations in order to modernize the legal framework that governs the sector and engage through a better way to current challenges. Another issue is data-driven. SIS drives huge volume of data mainly for both supervisory and tariff processes. And we are on the way to improve by automating the requirements management, implementing indicators and optimizing sanctions processes about terms, complaints, and data quality. And about digital transformation, an important part of internal administrative processes require technological support. In 2022, a digital desktop and signature are being consolidated, improving sanctions process and supervisory actions, among others. So, what is the very, very huge problem that we have the worst drought in the history of Chile? So the water scarcity is the main problem now. So it is essential, the tariff model, to face this problem, because how are the investment financed? Users paid for an efficient model firm, because in fact, the kind of regulation in Chile is like unpublished. It was very new in that moment when it was created. So we have like a theoretical firm that is not, the tariffs are not calculated with the real firm. In the practice, that means that we take the real firm and we put out all of the inefficiencies. So the customers pay a tariff that is calculated in a model firm regulation that is theoretical but is efficient. And which is the current challenge? The high cost of the new sources, because cheap sources are drained. And financing alternatives, the participation of the state in key investments because of the high cost of the desalination, because it would be a very high tariff that the customer should pay in that case. That's why we need the participation of the state. And water scarcity, in general diagnosis, in the north of Chile, that is the desert, there is a medium risk because they are used to live with scarcity of water. But in the central of Chile is the very high risk, and in those areas is when the most or the highest percentage of the population lives. In the center south is medium high risk, southern the medium risk, and the low risk in the southern part of Chile. Since statistics began, in 2021 was the fourth year with the lowest rainfall records. 10 consecutive years with rainfall records below historical averages. It's a very challenging scenario for the concessionary company of water and sanitation services, because now there's no water as there was before. So this is in the immediate focus, the short-term focus that we are carrying every day. But we have a strategic plan, and this show our medium and long-term focus. And the name of our strategic plan is Water and Sanitation Sector Agenda to 2030. And I will speak about the agenda because in this we discovered the new challenges. And I think it will be the more useful for the situation of Brazil that my colleagues commented in the previous speeches. So what is the Water and Sanitation Sector Agenda to 2030? Is the medium long-term strategic plan of SIS, engages the new challenges of water and sanitation sector to 2030, and it is composed by 12 projects, and every project has a team goals, and a Gantt chart with activities and their budget requirements. Why did Water and Sanitation Sector Agenda to 2030 start? It started because the initial challenges that were the motivation to liberalize the water and sanitation Chilean sector and to incorporate the private companies in the sector, those challenges had been complied. For example, drinking water, sewer, and wastewater coverage. In fact, wastewater coverage was, I think, the most important motivation to liberalize the sector, because Chile signed a lot of free trade agreements with European nation and United States and a lot of countries. So in those developed countries, they just led to the companies from other countries to being competitive in those countries, because you have to respect and comply all the rules. And in those countries, all of the companies had higher costs because they have wastewater treatment. So that's why if the Chilean companies want to entrance to those markets, they need to have the water treatment in our country. And another ones are high quality of services of service indicators. I will show you some graphs. These are the, for example, it's very notorious. The drinking water coverage is in blue, and before the privatization was very high. Also, not so much, because drinking water coverage was almost the 100%, but we see where coverage was a little more than 80%. But look at this: when the sector was liberalized, you can see the number of the operators, private operators, and you can see how it changed. And you can see also how the wastewater treatment increased. It was a little more than 0%, but look how it was increased, and now it's almost 100%. So the gray line is the coverage of wastewater treatment, and the percentage of private operators is the yellow line. So you can see how the incorporation of private sector was very important, essential to get the 100% of the wastewater treatment coverage. Another challenge when the sector was liberalized is the quality of water indicator. But I mean the indicators of all of the water, the quality of services. First, this is the quality of water indicator. You can see that the minimum is near of 98%. So it's very high. It's the quality of water indicator. And that's why the axis is not from 0, because they are all of the values are near of 100%. And another indicator of quality of service is the drinking water continuity indicator. You can see again, they are almost the value equal to 1 is like the equal to 100% in coverage. It's like perfect. So you can see all of the values in the sector are very high. Also, sewer continuity indicator. It is very, very, very near to 1. value. And quality of water pressure indicator. In the pressure, it happens the same. They are all very, very near of the value 1. So they were complied the initial challenges when the sector was liberalized. So in 2017, we asked ourselves, what are the new challenges for water and sanitation Chilean sector? So we made a participative process in 3 stages from 2017 to 2019. And it had 3 stages. First, identification of water and sanitation sector challenges to 2030. Second, elaboration of the roadmap for the 2030 water and sanitation sector challenges. And finally, elaboration of the work plans for the water and sanitation sector challenges to 2030. The water and sanitation sector agenda to 2030 was a very participative process. In fact, the participation was in this process, participation of more than 700 people related to water and sanitation sector, who are representatives of the public sector, private sector, academy, and citizenship. It had more than 60 workshops, interviews to more than 30 experts and relevant stakeholders related to the water sector, and participative activities in 15 cities throughout the country. From Arica, that is the big city in the northeast of Chile, to Punta Arenas, that is the main city in the southeast of Chile. There are pictures from the workshops. And another feature of the agenda is that a project team is created for every agenda project. And the work plan for every project includes activities and goals for every project. By a CIS internal bylaw, a team of studies and standard area is stated in charge of the agenda. That's why I'm the secretary of the agenda, which has the function to coordinate and report the activities of the projects to the strategic committee, where the superintendent is in. And we have also an advisory board that was created with members who represent institutions from public sector, private sector, academy, and citizenship. For example, the companies has a representative there, and also universities and other sectors. So the releasing of 12 projects of water and sanitation sector agenda to 2030 was in 2019, and was with the participation of Minister of Public Works, Minister of Housing and Urban Development, and an audience of 300 people. The releasing of the work plans for the projects of water and sanitation sector agenda to 2030 was with the participation of Minister of Public Works, Minister of Housing and Urban Development, and also representatives from Cooperative Research Center for Water Sensitive Cities from Australia, WaterNet from Amsterdam, International Water Association, and it counted with the audience of 300 people. And in that ceremony, in that event, it was at the end of 2019, and the superintendent signed the principles of the International Water Association for water-wise cities. So what were the results of all of this process that I have mentioned? There were 3 strategic axes. First, climate change and efficient use of water resources. Second, city and territory. And the third, the 21st century citizen. And all of strategic axes contain the challenges that were discovered in this process. And they were 8: resilient cities, innovation and efficient use of water, stormwater management, territorial planning, integrated basin management, rural sanitation services, bringing business closer to people, and water culture. So to face those challenges that are contained in those 3 strategic axes, in the SIS, we created 12 projects, and every project has activities and a plan and budget to 2030. So the projects are risk plans, water recycling and reduction of water losses, multi-purpose infrastructure, environmental footprint, sustainable sewage and stormwater management, harmonic city growth, SIS open data, quality standards in rural system, public account of water utility companies, quality drinking water, water culture, and blue seal. And you can see what is in this table. You can see the relation between the strategic axis with the challenges and with SIS projects. So the 12 projects are the agenda of the water and sanitation sector to 2030. These are the 12 projects, and I will speak a little about every one of them. The project 1 is risk plans, and it seeks a diagnosis of each water and sanitation facility that will be made in order to identify its vulnerabilities and critical infrastructure, and to identify management and investment gaps in order to face his different risks, emphasizing those derived from climate change. A second joint work will be carried out with various stakeholders in order to define minimum standards for the incorporation of risk management as an element to evaluate investment and management plans of concessionaires, as well as disaster response plans. An early warning system will be developed in collaboration with other public and private stakeholders in each borough in order to make better decisions in events that may affect supply, but above all, in order to inform the population in a timely manner, so that it is as well prepared as possible. So the main ideas are investment to face the climate change, resilient infrastructure, and disaster risk management. The second project, water recycling and reduction of water losses. First, a national reduction program of water losses will be carried out. Non-revenue water averages around 33% in the country. In a participatory manner and with an active role of the water utility companies. Legal reforms will be studied with and proposed to promote this objective. Innovation projects that incorporate intelligent technologies that allow monitoring their networks will be promoted, and increasing the replacement of obsolete infrastructure. Second, a working group will be convened with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Housing of Urban Development in order to facilitate the full implementation of the new Grey Water Law, because we have a new water to recycling the grey water, and it is from like 2 or 3 years ago. And third, with regard to reuse of wastewater, especially those that are currently discharged into the sea, work will be carried out with public and private stakeholders in the diagnosis, evaluation, and development of replicable business models, facilitating their application and seeking to maximize the benefits for all of stakeholders. It is important to say that in Chile we have a problem with the property of the water, because we can promote the reuse when the discharge of the wastewater treatment plant when the discharge is into the sea, but when the discharge is into the river, for example, to the lake, there are downer in that lake, on that river, for example, users from agriculture. So when in Chile we have like water rights to take advantage of the water, those users from agriculture, they say that water is mine. So the water company cannot sell that discharge, the water from that discharge, because it will be harmful for that user from agriculture. So that's why in the superintendency there was in the north a case when a company sold the treated wastewater, and the superintendent discount the 50% of that sale from the tariff for wastewater treatment that the users, the consumers, pay in their bills. So the key concepts are elaborating a standard for measuring losses through the water balance, encouraging the reuse of treated wastewater, and encouraging the reuse of treated gray water. The third project, harmonic city growth. And the first idea is the work will be done to speed up the process of expanding concessions, proactively triggering processes in coordination with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and proposing legal changes that point in this direction. Work will be done also jointly with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in order to establish development plans for the planned growth of cities, which will guide the growth of sanitation concessions. The main idea is that speeding up the city growing by the coordination with Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and because of the conflicting purposes between constructions companies and water and sanitation companies. Because constructions companies, for example, they are building houses or buildings, they say that they need to have the water connections, and the water companies say that no, first you should build the construction, the building or houses, and after that I will connect to the water. So it is a conflict there, and in this project it is considered to quantify. Yes.
Rodrigo, eu gostaria de lhe pedir.
Rodrigo, I would like to ask you to, I don't know how much you have to cover, if you could speed things up, so because our time is nearly up. We only have 25 minutes left. It is excellent to hear, but I'm just thinking if you can actually finish in 5 minutes. Thank you. Sorry to apologize for interrupting.
No problem. But as Jefferson says, we have also a problem with the settlements. Because of the immigration, they were disappearing, but in the last years, they started to increase again. So we need to quantify the population in those irregular connections. And the project for sustainable and sewage and stormwater management. The key ideas are rainwater entries in wastewater infrastructure. Then the quantity of rainwater joint wastewater overcomes the capacity of wastewater treatment plants, what causing quality of service problems. In the project 5, the main idea is that the water and sanitation companies have to be accountable for their users through a certified standard of relationship and increasing the quality of service perception that the users have. In the project 6, the quality drinking water, the main idea is that the quality of drinking water is today one of the central aspects of concern of people and should be prioritized, as well as the rates that are paid for water and for water users. The project 7, multi-purpose infrastructure, the main idea is taking advantage of synergies among public sector institutions to obtain more efficient water system for the water users of different sectors. For example, if the Ministry of Agriculture is building a reservoir for the users of our agriculture sector, the idea is that a little percent could be used for example, rural drinking water users, because the human consumption is very, very low in the percentage. The project 8, environmental footprint. The idea is measuring and reducing the environmental footprint of water and sanitation sector. Mainly, they are from the wastewater treatment plants. The project 9 sees open data. The idea is sharing the information of SIS that is useful to integrated management of water resources with other public institutions. And the project 10, quality standards in rural systems. The main idea is defining and supervising the quality of service standards for rural water and sanitation system because of the new law that I mentioned before. The project 11, water culture. The main idea is the achievement of a water culture because it is essential for sustainability and the use of water. And finally, the project 12, Blue Seal. The main idea is certify efficiency of water use in devices, for example, washing machines, showers, and materials of industrial sector that use water. For example, construction industry, that, for example, if they build a building, we can say to the people that want to sell an apartment in that building, that building is sustainable. So it is from a sector that is efficient in the water consumption. And finally, to end this presentation, about the water user sectors in Chile and other ones, I can mention that water code was made when there wasn't scarcity. So it happens the same with the law of water and sanitation sectors. That's why we have to make changes in the legal framework to foster, to promote the reuse of wastewater, the treated wastewater, and also to reduce the water losses. Another feature is water rights conflicts. There are a lot, as the property that I mentioned before, that is a very, very complicated problem to reuse wastewater, treated wastewater. And other problem that we have more than 40 just public institutions related to water. So it's very complicated because every institution just care and just has competencies, faculties for their sectors. So it is very complicated to take advantages from synergies, for example, and to have an integrated management of water resource. Also, there is a lack of a national system of water information, and all of the users and stakeholders have a consensus, even among the previous government, the Constitutional Convention, that are writing the proposal for a new constitution in Chile, and the current government, that is necessary, first, a national institution in charge of the management of water resources, empowered with proper faculties and a budget. And second, the prioritization of water human consumption. Because we have a problem that, for example, because of the water rights, for example, we have a rural country that they don't have water, but next to them there are a hill full of avocado trees. So that's why it is a very important thing to the prioritization of the water human consumption. And obrigado, and thanks for the invitation.
Rodrigo, on behalf of ABIS, we thank you. It is important to highlight that we understand that your presentation was above our expectations, especially when we think about this point of our webinar. It shows very meticulously, very much in details, the need to relate and articulate all stakeholders that are part of the system, involving all the areas that are impacted by integrated water management, right? Monica, Jefferson. Now we have some questions on the chat, and the questions also pertain this: the purpose of the new water legal framework to have, at the bare minimum, a consequence to strongly relate and have a better connection and relationship with other sectors and stakeholders. And the presentation shows that the legal framework and the plans that you have show this relationship between the different synergies, so that we have a disconnect, and the 2030 at the basis, so that we understand how the water legal framework now in Brazil, how can that connect directly with the causes and consequences related to sanitation. So how do they relate? You see, so we have three major, a lot of ground to cover from our speakers. And now I would like to please ask Monica and Jefferson to open your cameras so that we can have the debate, the Q&A. Even though the time is short, this is an online event. We need this time together. It is not a full-day seminar, so this is the best. Let's try to make the best out of the time we have together, so we can address the questions from our audience. So we have some questions here, and I am going to make sure I will try and address the questions to each different speaker. I'll moderate the content, therefore, so that everybody gets to address at least one question, okay? The first question will be to Jefferson, because we started with Professor Monica, but I know it's ladies first, but if I may, I'll have Jefferson first. By the way, I would like to congratulate all women in this sector. So important to have women in our industry. It's part of our purpose to have ABIS to integrate women at all points. Right. Professor Jefferson, there's a question here for you. I have 6 questions, and I'm going to have 2 questions for every speaker. For you, dear Jefferson, the assessment, environmental strategic assessment application, and wouldn't that be opportunistic when it comes to legal framework? Would you be able to take notes and then address? And there's also a related question from our dear director, Carlos Alberto Rosito. He is our National IABIS director. He's joining our event and he's asking the following question. Would it be time to review priorities for Threadwater Reservoir and go back and give the importance to regulating water reservoir? This question, I would like to hear your perception, Jefferson, but Monica, I would like to hear your take about this question. I don't know if you managed, I can repeat the question. Would it be time to review the priority of Threadwater reservoir and give importance to reservoirs that are indeed regulating? This is a very important topic, right, Professor Jefferson, when it comes to water integral management. Now, I'm going to ask a question to our friend Rodrigo. Rodrigo, question for you, okay? Rodrigo. Chile, it's actually a comment, it's a remark, really, not a question. It says, Chile suffers a lot with climate change just like us. Question is, would you say climate change has a major impact today? As a consequence, what do you see as the main impacts? How would you rank? And how do they connect to the legal framework? And does the legislation in Chile help face these issues? This question is from Maria Bernardetti. Maria Bernardetti. So, these are the main points of the questions so that we can wrap our session. Maria Bernardetti has a question to Jefferson. There are research lines that can be to water cisterns. I understand with profit water, etc., it would be more appropriate for cisterns. And Monica, one more question for you. To revitalize rivers and recover ecosystems connected to basins, it's always an afterthought. Question, how to work on that if water is only seen as a basic resource? So these are questions from our listeners and audience. Please be very objective and short and brief in your answers so that everybody have enough time to address the questions so we can wrap right after. And thank you very much. Let's start with Jefferson, then Monica, and then Rodrigo. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. I don't know if you saw that on the chat. I actually had read the chat. Questions were very interesting. Monica will remember about the ecology implementation, never done because there was never really defined. Once it's defined, we will implement that surely. We have issues that are beyond this question, really. I saw a lot on the chat, people saying, why call it a resource? It is a resource. Water is a resource. It can't be said simply this or the other. When you get this water, if you don't treat the biggest water basin in the world is Amazon, someone cannot just get water from the margin, like Negro River, for example. For those who know what I mean. The minimum bare treatment must be done so that one can ingest or use that water so that you have no health issues. So that's the first point. So in the legal framework, we actually see things that are much more important. Ecology, environmental protection is important. I would say fundamental. And I believe I was brief and very straightforward in my answer. Second point, there is a risk. There's a liability, right? If I got the question right, water, threads of water. When you speak of that, you speak of run of the river reservoir and the multiple uses and what we are doing in the country as a whole. And the demonization of water resources for the power grid. I think it is fundamental for our country. What it needs is better controls for the water reservoir and also have caution at multiple uses, because that is what is being lacking. What we see lacking in society as a whole is common sense. I see that we've been not really being militant, but we've been working on the session. I will use the word work on, because to speak solely about thread of water or run of the river reservoir, the water flow rate usually is not enough, meaning we need a reservoir. We're speaking about climate change, but we're neglecting the fact that we may have meaningful changes and in the climate, and all that is impacting our society as a whole. And as to research, that is also, and also in the, when it comes to water management and our national board and in academia, we see people defending this thesis from different states, like Espírito Santo, people who work in the south with data from the north, with the cistern topic, for example. Now, they did because it was in the media recently. But mind you, all of that to for reuse, when we speak of what is very little used, all of that, local sanitation in small property could be, like Professor Rodrigo said, the recycled water could be used for rural purposes. Recycled water could be the main source, so that we can, but we usually avoid this type of topic, and I find it incredibly important. So I think I was concise and I addressed the 3 questions. Those were my questions, right, Josiva? Yes, Professor. Perfect. Thank you so much. You addressed fully, and we thank you. Professor Monica, floor is yours. Please address the questions. Would you like me to read a question? No, no necessary. I took notes. Thank you. What first point is, and you mentioned, and I'm very glad to answer your questions about reservoirs. I would say this discussion is something that we should resume. Climate change have a very severe impact on water, rainfall levels and water levels, and the regulating reservoirs are incredibly important facilities so that we can face these challenges that are coming, especially when we think of climate change. So the country has been discussing this, from regulating reservoir to run of the river reservoir, and now we're looking at regulating reservoir at a different point of view, from water security perspective. So it is necessary to have infrastructure so for water security, so we need to regulate this. And I think this year or last year, 2021, our water power plants have suffered a lot, and water prices went up. And Brazil is a country that has renewable energy in its water mix, in its power grid, in its energy mix. And the advantage is that gives us more security. And the same applies for public supply. Public supply, the same thing. So for public service is a very important infrastructure to increase water security. That is true. And I think we need to face this discussion and have regulation as water security.
Regarding the recovery of rivers, I think that what we need to work on when it comes to water resource management, I always say that the hardest part when it comes to water resource management is integration across policies, integration among users and different policies as well. I think that's the hardest part. and the greatest challenge that we have for us to have good water resource management. So I think that the recovery of water bodies is something that is very important. And recently, we've seen the creation of laws that are trying to facilitate this process. And I think that the new sanitation framework imposes universal access by 2033 and a series of other important points. There are efficiency indicators and sewage treatment indicators and a series of other matters that aim to reduce the disposal of pollutants in our rivers. So I think this is already an important measure for the recovery of these water bodies. We also have a quality drinking water framework. We also have another framework that is related to our forest code with the preservation of APPs. So our challenge when it comes to water resource management is to fully integrate these policies. The regulatory framework, as I mentioned, is complementary to the management system so that we can use water in a rational manner. I fully agree with Jefferson. This does not exclude other things that are very much necessary. We need to have a permit granting system that is efficient, which also verifies the amount of water available and how much can be used. I think that there are also other instruments that need to be further discussed. We need to encourage rational use in agriculture and in urban areas as well. So we need to have this as part of our discussion, rational use as part of our discussion. So our challenge in the water resource sector is to bring together all of these different policies so that we can have environmental protection, rational use, access to water, everything working together. And this is our major challenge. Thank you, and thank you for asking this question. Yeah, Monica, you're right. Integration is quite challenging. And we know that we also have some specificities depending on regions. We have always weirs that are getting distressed by droughts, especially due to the climate changes that we are facing now. So fear is definitely a major factor because we want to store water so much since we have so much uncertainty when it comes to water supply. Now, I will pass the floor to Professor Rodrigo. I'll ask you to be brief, so in your answer.
Thank you, Josiva. Well, the main impact, I think the main problem is the drought, the water scarcity. And in that sense, the legal framework doesn't help because it was made when there was abundant water. It wasn't in a scarcity situation as we have now. So that's why it is necessary that, for example, another new solutions. That's why I mentioned a lot in my presentation changes in the law, in the regulation, in the legal framework, because the law didn't consider the scarcity of water. Then, for example, one solution is that the state could help with a part of the investment or finance some part, for example, of the salination plant. And it is complicated with the current legal framework because, as I mentioned, every institution, public institution, just see their faculties and their sector and those interests. That's why there is not synergy. There is not integrated management of water resources. So that's why, for example, in the area of Santiago, the users from agricultural sector, they have given part of the water for the human consumption. And it is a little complicated because in Chile, for example, the agricultural users, they see the water companies that private sector, because those are companies. They don't see that they are for the human consumption. So that's why, but indeed, till now, we haven't had problems because those users from agricultural sector have helped to ensure the human consumption. And the key, I think, and to finish, the problem is that we have to avoid increasing the tariff because we have quality of service, we have continuity. Till now, we haven't had problems, but the price that we have to pay for it is that the increasing in the tariff. So to avoid our problem is how to avoid increasing the tariff for the users in the bill of the users.
Professor Rodrigo, entendo que
Professor Rodrigo, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you all on behalf of ABIS and on behalf of the Brazil Water Week coordination of this year. I want to say that I have shared all of your presentations on YouTube, and you can go back and watch it. And we believe that we need to advance more and more to deal with the gaps that we still haven't been able to deal with. As Professor Monica mentioned, we need to deal with that, and as Professor Jefferson mentioned, we need to look at different levels, at different policy-making levels, and work together. And Professor Rodrigo summarized it all. When the legislation was created in Chile, for example, they didn't know how they would deal with water shortage and water crisis. That make it harder for the implementation of other legislations. And now they are trying to adapt their legislations and instruments to deal with the current scenario. So we believe now that we are in a very unique moment because we can discuss this new framework to deal with our current situation. We should have greater integration of different sectors and mitigate future problems based on other experiences, such as the Chilean experience. So I think that's how we can close our webinar. We got to the conclusion that we need to discuss even further to get to the ideal format. And we can understand that we can also overcome our challenges. And we, just as ABIS, deal with people, deal with human dignity. And that's the integration, that's the feeling that drives us forwards, and that makes Rodrigo and Monica and Jefferson be here with us, because we are all very passionate about this, and we really hope that we can affect the lives of our end users. So we are very happy on behalf of ABIS to have had you all here with us, and now we have reached the end of our first session. And this is not the end, this is actually the beginning, and you can all go back and watch this video and can learn from the experience that was shared here with us, so that we can have better discussions in the future regarding this new bill and regarding, of course, this attempt to bring solutions to these gaps, and also to try to create other pieces to the puzzle and deal with all of that. So once again, I would like to thank all of you. And last but not least, just remember that Brazil Water Week will take place from the 23rd to the 27th of May. If you haven't registered yet to participate, just go to www.brazilwaterweek.com.br. You will find all the information you need on this website. And I have great news. ABIS has prepared very good registration packages. So if you want to register as a group, you're going to get a discount, both individuals and corporations can register to participate. This is very important. This is a very important event, and we want to make sure that you can participate. Just go to our website and check out all the information that we have there. For those who have attended today, thank you so much. We've had such distinguished participants here today, and once again, I'd like to thank you for your presence. And we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow at 10, we will be holding our next session on our YouTube channel. We'll give an overview of the regulation in the water sector in Latin America. And if you have the opportunity, please join us.
Portanto, nós vamos estar também em 29 a 1º de julho, em evento internacional.
And we will also have an international event from the 29th to the 1st of June, and this event will be held in Portugal. Just go to Surubeza 2022, Eventos Portugal. We will have ABIS and other organizations in Portugal organizing this very important event that will happen in July. Please join ABIS, join us in this discussion. Come and help us keep this discussion going. Become a member of our association. All you need to do is go to our website and click on Join Us and become a member, and you will find all the information that you need. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for being here today and for staying tuned to the end. And please make sure to stay tuned to our other events that we will be holding in the future. You can watch our events using different devices. So make sure you join us tomorrow, and make sure you join us in our Brazil Water Week. Don't miss out.